If her daughter breathes again, I don't need anyone to know I existed. The words barely escape his lips. Lost beneath the chaos of a five-star restaurant turned emergency room. They belong to a man in a stained waiter's apron, kneeling on marble floors beside a convulsing young girl. Her lips are turning blue. Her mother, one of the most powerful CEOs in the nation, screams for help that isn't coming fast enough. No one sees the waiter's hands move with surgical precision. No one notices the calm in his eyes, the kind forged in places where seconds decide between life and death. He doesn't wear a white coat. He doesn't carry credentials. He carries trays, wipes tables, and fades into the background of a world that forgot he ever mattered. But tonight, in the suffocating silence between heartbeats, those invisible hands will perform a miracle, and the woman whose empire controls millions will owe everything to the man nobody remembers. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The dining room of Luminaire glittered like a jewelry box turned inside out. Crystal chandeliers cast fractured rainbows across white tablecloths. Silverware clinked in perfect rhythm, with murmured conversations about mergers, acquisitions, and stock portfolios that could buy small nations. The restaurant sat on the 42nd floor of the Apex Tower in downtown Ashford, offering views of the city that made even billionaires pause to admire. It was the kind of place where reservations required 3 months' notice and a last name that opened doors. The kind of place where waiters moved like shadows, present but unseen, their hands steady as they poured wine worth more than their monthly rent. Bryce Chambers moved through that glittering world like a ghost. His black vest was pressed crisp, his white shirt spotless despite the grueling double shift. His jaw carried the shadow of stubble he hadn't had time to shave, and his eyes held the particular exhaustion of a man who worked 3 jobs to keep a roof over his daughter's head. He was 38 but looked older, his hands calloused not just from carrying trays but from years of labor that had nothing to do with fine dining. No one looked at him directly. Not the executives debating quarterly earnings at table 7. Not the socialites laughing over champagne at table 12. He was furniture with a pulse, a necessity they'd forget the moment they signed their checks. But Bryce had learned long ago that invisibility had its advantages. It meant no one asked questions. No one dug into his past. No one wondered why a man with his skills was serving lobster bisque instead of saving lives. Table 18 was different tonight. Chloe Martinez sat with her back straight as a blade, her burgundy dress tailored to perfection, her dark hair swept into an elegant twist. She was 34 and commanded Novatech Industries, a tech empire that had revolutionized artificial intelligence and data security. Forbes had called her the Titan of Tomorrow. Her net worth was estimated at $4 billion, though rumors suggested it was higher. Beside her sat her daughter, Zoe, 10 years old, with her mother's sharp eyes and a smile that could light up boardrooms. The girl wore a navy dress with white trim, her hair braided with small silver clips that caught the light. She swung her legs beneath the table, bored by adult conversation but too polite to complain. "Mom, can I order the steak?" Zoe asked, leaning over the menu that was almost as tall as she was. Chloe glanced up from her phone, where she'd been answering emails between courses. Her expression softened, the CEO mask slipping just slightly. "Of course, sweetheart. But cut it into small pieces, okay? Chew slowly." I know," Zoe said with the exasperation of someone who'd heard the same instruction 1,000 times. Bryce approached the table with practiced silence, his notepad ready. "Good evening. May I take your order?" Chloe barely glanced at him. "The salmon, grilled. No butter. And sparkling water. Not tap." "Certainly. And for the young lady?" "Filet mignon, medium rare," Zoe announced proudly, as if ordering steak was a mark of maturity. Bryce nodded, jotting it down. "Excellent choice. I'll have that out shortly." He turned to leave, but something made him pause. A flicker of instinct, the kind that had kept him alive in places where hesitation meant death. He glanced back at Zoe, at the way she fidgeted with her napkin, at the slight flush in her cheeks. Then the moment passed, and he walked away. The kitchen was chaos incarnate. Flames roared from stovetops. Chefs barked orders in 3 languages. Plates clattered. Bryce moved through it mechanically, clipping the order to the line and grabbing 2 waters for table 9. 30 minutes later, he returned, with their meals on a silver tray. The salmon glistened under herb garnish. The steak was perfectly seared, pink in the center, surrounded by roasted vegetables and a small ramekin of peppercorn sauce. "Enjoy your meal," Bryce said, setting the plates down with the careful precision of someone who understood that presentation mattered in places like this. Chloe didn't respond. She was already back on her phone, her fork moving automatically from plate to mouth while her eyes scanned a contract. Zoe, however, attacked her steak with enthusiasm. She cut a large piece, bigger than she should have, and popped it into her mouth. Bryce was halfway across the dining room when he heard it. Not a scream, not a shout, just a small, strangled sound, the kind that could easily be mistaken for a cough. He turned. Zoe's face had gone pale. Her hands were at her throat, her eyes wide with panic. She tried to cough, but nothing came out. No air, no sound, just terror. Chloe looked up from her phone, confusion flickering across her face. "Zoe? What's wrong?" The girl's lips were turning blue. Time fractured. The dining room continued its elegant hum, oblivious. A woman laughed at table 6. A man raised his glass in a toast at table 14. The pianist in the corner played something soft and French. But Bryce saw everything with the clarity of someone who had trained for moments like this, who had lived through them in places far deadlier than a 5-star restaurant. He moved, not quickly enough to draw attention, but with purpose. He crossed the dining room in seconds, his body already calculating angles, outcomes, risks. Chloe had risen from her seat, her voice climbing into panic. "Someone help, she's choking. Somebody do something." A waiter rushed toward the phone to call 911. A manager appeared, wringing his hands uselessly. Diners turned in their seats, murmuring with the kind of concern that stayed safely behind their tables. Bryce knelt beside Zoe's chair. "I need you to trust me," he said quietly, his voice steady as stone. Chloe whirled on him, her eyes wild. "Who are you? Get a doctor. Get someone who knows." "I know," Bryce said simply. He looked at Zoe, whose lips were now a deep shade of purple, her small hands clawing at her throat. "Sweetheart, I'm going to help you. Not if you understand." Zoe managed the smallest movement of her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. Bryce positioned himself behind her, his hands moving with the muscle memory of someone who had done this before under far worse conditions. He wrapped his arms around her small torso, one fist just above her navel, the other hand gripping it. "Step back," he said to Chloe, his tone leaving no room for argument. Then he thrust upward. Once, nothing. Twice, Zoe's body convulsed, but the obstruction held. Chloe's scream cut through the restaurant. "She's dying. Oh God, she's dying." Bryce adjusted his grip, his jaw tight. He thought of his own daughter, of how fragile life was, how quickly it could slip away. He thought of the promises he'd made, the oaths he'd taken in another life when he wore a different uniform. He thrust again. This time, something dislodged. A chunk of steak flew from Zoe's mouth, landing wetly on the marble floor. She gasped, a horrible, rattling sound that was the most beautiful thing Bryce had ever heard. Air rushed into her lungs. Color began to return to her face, slowly, like dawn breaking. She coughed violently, tears and saliva mixing as her body remembered how to breathe. The dining room erupted. Applause scattered like startled birds. Someone shouted for water. The manager appeared with a glass, his hands shaking so badly he nearly dropped it. Chloe collapsed to her knees beside her daughter, pulling Zoe into her arms with a sob that was half relief, half terror. "Oh God. Oh my baby. I thought I lost you. I thought." Zoe clung to her mother. Coughing and crying, her small body trembling. Bryce stood slowly, his hands still steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. He took one step back, then another, already fading into the background. "Wait." Chloe's voice cut through the chaos. She looked up at him. Her mascara streaked. Her CEO composure shattered. "Wait. You saved her. Who are you?" Bryce met her eyes for just a moment. In them, he saw the raw gratitude of a mother who had just watched death reach for her daughter and been denied. "Just a waiter," he said quietly. Then he turned and walked toward the kitchen, disappearing into the shadows where men like him belonged. Behind him, Chloe held her daughter and wept. The restaurant buzzed with shock and awe. Diners pulled out their phones, recording, gossiping, already crafting the story they'd tell at cocktail parties. But no one asked his name. No one ever did. The staff break room at Luminaire smelled like burnt coffee and desperation. It was tucked behind the kitchen, a cramped space with flickering fluorescent lights and a couch that had seen better decades. Bryce sat on that couch now, his vest unbuttoned, his head in his hands. His shift supervisor, Alec Jennings, leaned against the doorframe with his arms crossed. Alec was 52, balding, with the permanent scowl of someone who'd spent 30 years in food service and had the ulcers to prove it. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "That was some quick thinking out there," Alec said, his voice gruff, but not unkind. "The Heimlich, right? Where'd you learn that?" Bryce didn't look up. Red Cross certification. Everyone should know it. It was a lie. Or rather, it was a fraction of the truth. The kind of answer that satisfied curiosity without inviting more questions. Alec grunted. "Well, whatever. The woman's asking for you. Says she wants to thank you personally. Big tipper, probably. You should go." "I'm good," Bryce said flatly. "Chambers. She's Chloe Martinez. You know who that is? Novatech Industries? She could probably buy this entire building with her lunch money. If she wants to thank you, you smile and say you're welcome." Bryce finally looked up, his gray eyes tired. "I don't need thanks. I need to finish my shift." Alex stared at him for a long moment, then shook his head. "You're a strange one, Chambers. Most guys would be milking this for everything it's worth. Free publicity, maybe a job offer, who knows? But you?" He pushed off the doorframe. "You just want to disappear." "Something like that," Bryce muttered. After Alec left, Bryce sat alone in the silence. His hands, still steady during the emergency, now trembled slightly. He clenched them into fists, forcing the shaking to stop. He hated moments like this. Moments when the past clawed its way to the surface, when muscle memory betrayed him, when people looked at him and saw something other than the invisible man he'd worked so hard to become. The door creaked open. He looked up, expecting Alec again. Instead, a small figure slipped inside. Lily Chambers was 7 years old, small for her age, with dark curls that never stayed in their ponytail and eyes that saw far too much. She wore a pink backpack almost as big as she was, and carried a worn paperback book tucked under her arm. "Lily, what are you doing here?" Bryce stood quickly, concern flashing across his face. "You're supposed to be at Mrs. Patel's." "She had to leave early." "Family emergency," Lily said matter-of-factly. She climbed onto the couch, her legs dangling. "So I walked here. It's only 4 blocks. Lily, I know. Don't walk alone after dark. Stay on main streets. Don't talk to strangers," she recited in a sing-song voice. "I'm 7, Dad, not stupid." Despite everything, Bryce felt his lips twitch into almost a smile. 7 years old and already a know-it-all. "I learned from the best," she shot back, grinning. He sat beside her, his exhaustion momentarily forgotten. "How was school?" "Boring. We learned about fractions again. I already know fractions." She pulled out her book, showing him the cover. It was a medical encyclopedia, far too advanced for a second grader, with pages flagged by dozens of colorful sticky notes. Bryce sighed. Lily, you're supposed to be reading stories about princesses and dragons, not, he squinted at the page. The cardiovascular system. Princesses are boring, Lily said simply. She flipped to a marked page. Did you know the human heart beats about 100,000 times a day? That's 35 million times a year. That's so cool. Where did you even get that book? Library sale. 50 cents. She looked up at him with those impossibly bright eyes. Mrs. Chen at the library said it was too advanced for me. But I told her I could handle it. And I can. Look, I made notes. She showed him pages, covered in careful, childish handwriting. Definitions. Questions. Little drawings of organs with arrows pointing to different parts. Something in Bryce's chest tightened. He saw so much of her mother in Lily. The same hunger for knowledge. The same refusal to be limited by what others thought she should know. You're supposed to be a kid, he said softly. I am a kid, Lily replied. A kid who likes learning stuff. What's wrong with that? Nothing. Everything. Bryce didn't know how to explain that he wanted her to have a childhood uncomplicated by the weight of adult knowledge, that he wanted her to play and laugh and not carry books about death and disease. But he also knew that fire couldn't be contained. Lily's curiosity, her brilliance, was part of who she was. Trying to suppress it would be like trying to hold back the tide. Nothing's wrong with it, he said finally. Just promise me you'll also read something fun, once in a while, okay? I'll think about it, Lily said, which was her way of saying no. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Lily asked, Did something happen tonight? You look sad. Bryce hesitated. He'd never told Lily the full truth about his past. She knew he'd been in the service, knew he'd trained as a medic, knew they'd moved to Ashford 3 years ago and started over, but she didn't know why. She didn't know about the tribunal, the accusations, the dishonorable discharge that had stripped away everything he'd worked for. She didn't know that her father had once been Dr. Bryce Chambers, a field surgeon who'd saved hundreds of lives in places most people couldn't find on a map. She didn't know he'd lost everything for refusing an order. Someone needed help tonight, Bryce said carefully. A young girl. She was choking. Lily's eyes widened. Did you save her? Yeah. With the Heimlich maneuver? How do you know about? He stopped, shaking his head. Never mind. Yes, with the Heimlich. Lily beamed with pride. That's so cool, Dad. You're like a superhero. I'm a waiter, sweetheart. You're a waiter who saves people, she corrected. She leaned against his shoulder, her voice going quiet. I bet Mom would be proud. The words hit him harder than any punch. He closed his eyes, throat tight. Lily's mother, Sarah, had died 4 years ago. Cancer, swift and merciless. She'd been a physician herself, working in underserved communities, believing medicine was a calling, not a career. She'd left Lily her medical books, her stethoscope, and a letter Bryce had sealed away until Lily was old enough to understand it. Yeah, Bryce managed. Yeah, she would be. Lily pulled something from her backpack, a small leather journal, worn at the edges, Sarah's journal. Lily had found it 6 months ago and had been reading it obsessively, treating every page like scripture. Listen to this, Lily said, flipping to a marked page. She read aloud in her clear, careful voice. Medicine isn't about being the smartest person in the room. It's about being the most present. It's about seeing the person, not just the symptoms. If you can do that, you can save lives, even when the odds say you can't. She looked up at him. That's what you did tonight, right? You saw her. You were present. Bryce couldn't speak. His daughter, 7 years old, holding her mother's wisdom like a torch in the darkness, reminding him of truths he'd tried to bury. Come on, he said, his voice rough. Let's get you home. You have school tomorrow. Can we stop for pizza? We had pizza 3 days ago. So, Pizza is always a good idea. Despite everything, despite the exhaustion and the memories and the fear that his past would catch up to him, Bryce laughed. A real laugh, short but genuine. Okay, pizza. They left through the back exit, Lily chattering about her day, about the heart facts she'd learned, about a science project she wanted to do on blood types. Bryce listened, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. Above them, in the gleaming restaurant 42 floors up, Chloe Martinez sat with her daughter, asking questions no one could answer. Who was he? Where did he come from? Why did he disappear? But down here, in the streets of Ashford where streetlights flickered and taxi horns blared, Bryce Chambers was just a tired father walking home with his brilliant, beautiful daughter, invisible to the world that had forgotten him. And for now, that was exactly how he wanted it. Their apartment was a fourth-floor walk-up in the Creston district, the kind of neighborhood where rent was cheap because hope was cheaper. The building's brick facade was crumbling in places, graffiti decorated the alley beside it, and the elevator had been broken for 6 months. But the landlord was lenient about late payments. The neighbors mostly kept to themselves, and it was close enough to Lily's school that she could walk there safely. Bryce unlocked the door to apartment 4C, the hinges creaking in protest. The space was small, a living room that doubled as his bedroom, a kitchenette with appliances from the 1992, and a single bedroom that belonged to Lily. But it was clean. Bryce made sure of that. The floors were swept, the dishes washed, the windows opened daily to let in fresh air. There were no holes in the walls, no stains on the carpet. Poverty didn't have to mean neglect, and he refused to let their circumstances define them. Lily dropped her backpack by the door and immediately headed to her room. I'm gonna study for a bit before bed. It's already 8:30, Bryce called after her. You have 30 minutes, then lights out. 45, 35. And that's final. Deal. Bryce smiled, shaking his head. She'd inherited her mother's negotiation skills too. He moved to the kitchen, heating up leftover pizza in the microwave. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, expecting a text from Alec about tomorrow's shift. Instead, it was from an unknown number. This is Chloe Martinez. I got your number from your employer. I'd like to speak with you. Please call me at your earliest convenience. Bryce stared at the message for a long moment. His thumb hovered over the delete button. Then he heard Lily's voice from her room. Dad, can you help me with something? He pocketed the phone, unanswered, and walked to her doorway. Lily's room was her sanctuary. The walls were covered with hand-drawn diagrams of the human body, anatomical charts she'd printed from the library computer, and photos of Sarah from before the cancer had taken her. A small desk sat in the corner, covered with books, notebooks, and the leather journal that never left her sight. She was sitting cross-legged on her bed now, the journal open in her lap, her brow furrowed in concentration. What's up, sweetheart? There's a word here I don't understand, Lily said, pointing to a page. Mom wrote about something called triage. What does that mean? Bryce sat on the edge of her bed, careful not to disturb the mountain of books beside her pillow. He looked at Sarah's handwriting, still so familiar it hurt. Triage, he said slowly, is when doctors have to make really hard choices. When there are a lot of hurt people and not enough time or supplies to help everyone, they have to decide who to help first. Lily's eyes widen. That sounds awful. How do they choose? They help the people who are most likely to survive if they get care right away. It's not about who deserves help more. It's about using limited resources to save the most lives. But what about the people they don't help first? Don't they feel bad? Bryce swallowed hard. Yeah, they feel terrible. But sometimes there are no good choices, only less bad ones. Lily was quiet for a moment, processing. Then she said, Is that what you had to do before you were a waiter? The question caught him off guard. He'd been so careful never to talk about his time in the service, about the field hospitals and the blood and the impossible decisions. Sometimes, he admitted. Did you feel bad? Every time. Lily reached out and took his hand, her small fingers wrapping around his calloused ones. I think feeling bad means you cared. If you didn't feel bad, that would be worse. Out of the mouths of 7-year-olds. Wisdom that could bring grown men to their knees. You're right, Bryce said quietly. It would be worse. Lily flipped to another page in the journal, one she'd clearly read many times because the corner was dog-eared. Mom wrote something here I really like. She said, every life you touch leaves a mark on you. Carry those marks with honor, because they mean you were present for someone's most important moment. She looked up at him, her eyes shining. You were present tonight, Dad. For that girl. You carry her mark now. Bryce felt his throat close. He pulled Lily into a hug, holding her tight against his chest, feeling her small heart beat against his. When did you get so wise? He murmured. I read a lot, she said, her voice muffled against his shirt. Plus, I have a really good teacher. They stayed like that for a moment, father and daughter, bound by love and loss, and the legacy of a woman who had believed medicine was sacred. Finally, Bryce pulled back, brushing a curl from Lily's forehead. All right, time for bed. We've got a big day tomorrow. What's tomorrow? School. Work. The usual. Lily made a face, but didn't argue. She changed into her pajamas, a too-big t-shirt with a cartoon skeleton on it that said, I've got a bone to pick with you. Bryce had bought it for her as a joke. She wore it at least twice a week. He tucked her in, pulling the blankets up to her chin. Sleep tight, sweetheart. Dad? Yeah? That girl you saved tonight. Do you think she knows how lucky she is? Bryce thought about Chloe Martinez, about the terror in her eyes, about how close she'd come to losing everything that mattered. I think she does now, he said. Lily smiled, satisfied, and closed her eyes. Within minutes, her breathing deepened into sleep. Bryce stood in the doorway for a long time, watching her, this small, brilliant, fierce person who carried her mother's journal like a map to the future, who asked questions that cut to the heart of things, who saw him not as a failed doctor or a disgraced soldier, but as a father who saved people. He thought about the text message still sitting unanswered on his phone, about Chloe Martinez and her questions, about the risk of being seen, of being remembered, of having his past dragged into the light. Then he looked at Lily, sleeping peacefully with Sarah's journal on her nightstand, and he knew exactly why he stayed invisible. Because this mattered more than recognition. This tiny apartment, this extraordinary daughter, this quiet life they'd built from the ashes of everything he'd lost. Some legacies were written in headlines, others were written in bedtime stories and hand-me-down journals and the fierce love between a father and daughter. Bryce knew which kind mattered more. He turned off the light, leaving Lily's door cracked open the way she liked it, and walked back to the living room. He pulled out his phone, looked at Chloe Martinez's message one more time, then he deleted it. Outside, the city hummed with its endless noise. Sirens wailed. Cars honked. Somewhere, someone laughed. Someone cried. Someone lived and died in the space between heartbeats. But here, in apartment 4C, in a building that nobody noticed in a neighborhood nobody wrote about, Bryce Chambers made himself a promise. He would stay invisible. He would protect Lily. He would honor Sarah's memory by being present, by being the father their daughter deserved. The world could forget him. As long as Lily remembered, that was enough. He lay down on the pull-out couch, staring at the water-stained ceiling, and tried to sleep. But Sarah's words from the journal echoed in his mind, carried by Lily's voice. Every life you touch leaves a mark on you. Tonight, he'd saved Zoe Martinez, and whether he wanted it or not, that mark was already beginning to burn. The morning sun cut through the gaps in the Venetian blinds, striping the living room in bars of gold and shadow. Bryce woke to the sound of Lily humming in the kitchen, a tuneless melody that somehow made him smile despite the knot of exhaustion lodged between his shoulder blades. He pushed himself upright on the pull-out couch, his back protesting. 38 years old and sleeping on a worn mattress that dipped in the middle. Some days, he felt twice that age. "Morning, Dad," Lily called out cheerfully. She was standing on a step stool by the counter, carefully pouring cereal into 2 bowls. "I made breakfast. I can see that." Bryce stretched, joints popping. "What time is it?" 6:45. "You have to be at work by 9, right? And I have school at 8:15. She carried the bowls to their small table with the concentration of a surgeon handling precious instruments. Not a single cornflake spilled. They ate together in comfortable silence, the kind that came from years of it being just the 2 of them. Lily read from her medical encyclopedia between bites, occasionally sharing facts about the lymphatic system that Bryce already knew but pretended to find fascinating. His phone buzzed. Once. Twice. 3 times in rapid succession. He ignored it. "Somebody really wants to talk to you," Lily observed, not looking up from her book. "Probably work. On your personal phone?" She was too smart for her own good. After breakfast, Bryce walked Lily to school, her hand small and warm in his. The morning was crisp, autumn beginning to assert itself over the last gasps of summer, leaves scattered across the sidewalk in shades of amber and rust. Creston Elementary was a brick building that had seen better decades, but the teachers cared, and the principal knew every student by name. It was enough. "Have a good day, sweetheart," Bryce said, crouching down to Lily's level. She threw her arms around his neck, squeezing tight. "You too, Dad. Save some more people if you can." He watched her skip through the school gates, her backpack bouncing, her curls catching the light. She turned once to wave, and he waved back, his chest tight with a love so fierce it sometimes scared him. Then he pulled out his phone. 7 missed calls. All from the same unknown number, 3 voicemails, 2 text messages. He recognized the number now. Chloe Martinez. Against his better judgment, he opened the first voicemail. "Mr. Chambers, this is Chloe Martinez. I need to speak with you about what happened last night. My daughter is alive because of you, and I refuse to let that go unacknowledged. Please call me back." The second message was shorter, more urgent. "I'm not going away. I have questions, and I think you have answers. Please, just give me 5 minutes." The third made his blood run cold. "I spoke to your manager. He mentioned you've been working at Luminaire for 2 years. Before that, you worked at 3 other restaurants in the city. But I can't find any record of you before that. No employment history, no social media, nothing. It's like you didn't exist until 3 years ago. That's not normal, Mr. Chambers. Who are you really?" He deleted all 3 messages, his jaw clenched. This was exactly what he'd been afraid of. Attention. Questions. Someone digging into a past he'd spent years burying. The text messages were more of the same. Polite but insistent. She wanted to meet. To talk. To thank him properly. What she really wanted was answers. Bryce pocketed his phone and started walking. Not toward Luminaire, but in the opposite direction. Toward a place he hadn't visited in months. The Ashford Public Library sat on the corner of 5th and Maple. A grand old building with marble columns and wide steps, worn smooth by generations of feet. Inside, it smelled like old paper and possibility. He found an empty computer terminal in the back corner and logged in with the guest account. His fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment before he typed in his own name. Bryce Chambers. The search returned thousands of results. A high school teacher in Oregon. A real estate agent in Texas. A guitarist in a bar band in Nashville. None of them were him. He tried again, adding qualifiers. Bryce Chambers military. Bryce Chambers surgeon. Bryce Chambers discharge. Nothing. The internet had no memory of Captain Bryce Chambers, the field surgeon, who'd saved lives in places the government didn't officially acknowledge. The man who'd been recommended for commendations he'd never received. The man who'd been erased. His mind drifted back, unwillingly, to 5 years ago, to the tribunal that had changed everything. He'd been stationed overseas, assigned to a classified medical unit supporting special operations. The work was brutal, The conditions impossible, but he'd been good at it. Exceptional, even. His commanding officers said he had hands that could coax life back from the edge of death. Then came Operation Clearwater. The official story was that it was a humanitarian mission, providing medical aid to refugees in a conflict zone. The reality was darker, more complicated. The military had been testing experimental treatments, using the refugees as unwitting subjects for drugs that hadn't been approved for human trials. Bryce had discovered it by accident. A pattern in the medication logs that didn't match standard protocols. Drugs with designations he didn't recognize. Side effects that were being documented but not addressed. He'd reported it up the chain of command. That had been his first mistake. His second was refusing to stay quiet when they told him the research was classified, necessary, that the potential to save thousands of lives justified the risk to a few. A few turned out to be 43 people. 27 adults. 16 minors. He'd refused to administer the experimental drugs. He'd documented everything he could, prepared to blow the whistle, to go to the press if necessary. They'd moved faster. Within a week, he was facing a tribunal. The charges were vague, bureaucratic smokescreens designed to justify the outcome they'd already decided. Insubordination, failure to follow orders, compromising mission security. No one mentioned the refugees. No one mentioned the experiments. The entire operation was sealed, classified at a level that meant it legally never happened. His attorney, a JAG officer who looked fresh out of law school, had advised him to accept a general discharge and move on. "Fight this, and they'll destroy you," she'd said. "Take the discharge, keep your mouth shut, and you can rebuild." But Bryce had refused. He'd demanded a full investigation. He'd named names, cited regulations, presented evidence. So they'd changed his discharge from general to dishonorable. Overnight, he became untouchable. His medical license was revoked pending investigation, an investigation that never materialized. His military service record was sealed. His security clearance was stripped. Worst of all, his wife Sarah was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer 3 months later. The kind of cancer that required aggressive, experimental treatment, the kind of treatment that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, treatment that military insurance would have covered, if he still had it. He'd sold everything, their house, their cars, Sarah's jewelry. It wasn't enough. The bills mounted, the cancer spread, and on a cold February morning, Sarah had squeezed his hand and whispered, "Take care of our girl," and then she was gone. After the funeral, Bryce had looked at Lily, 4 years old and clutching her mother's journal, and he'd made a decision. He would disappear. He'd changed cities, found work that didn't require background checks, places where cash was still king and questions weren't asked, restaurants, warehouses, construction sites, anywhere he could fade into the background and keep Lily fed, clothed, safe. For 3 years, it had worked. Until last night, until Chloe Martinez. Bryce closed the browser window and sat back, his hands pressed flat against the table. His heart pounded with old anger, old grief. A soft voice interrupted his thoughts. "Rough morning." He looked up to find an elderly librarian standing nearby, her glasses perched on the end of her nose, concern etched into the lines of her face. "Something like that," Bryce said. She smiled gently. "I've worked here 30 years. You learn to recognize the look of someone running from their past." She gestured to the empty screen. "Whatever you're trying to forget, the library's a good place for it. Books don't judge." Bryce managed a weak smile. "Thank you." She patted his shoulder and moved on, pushing her cart of books to be reshelved. He sat there for another 10 minutes, staring at nothing, until his phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't a call or a text. It was an email, forwarded from the Luminaire management system. The subject line read, "Incident Report. Table 18, October 10th. He opened it. The body of the email was brief, clinical, describing the choking incident and the successful intervention by staff member Bryce Chambers. But at the bottom was a note from the restaurant's owner. "Mr. Chambers, Miss Martinez has requested your contact information and permission to recognize you publicly for your heroic actions. Please advise how you'd like us to proceed. Bryce's jaw tightened. She wasn't going to let this go. She was going to keep digging, keep pushing, until she uncovered everything he'd worked to hide. He thought about Lily, about her safety, about the quiet life they'd built. Then he thought about Sarah's words, the ones Lily had read to him last night. Every life you touch leaves a mark on you. He'd saved Zoe Martinez. That was the mark. The rest, the recognition, the questions, the danger of exposure, that was the price. For 3 years, he'd been running. Maybe it was time to stop, or maybe it was time to run harder. Bryce closed the email without responding, gathered his things, and left the library. The morning sun was higher now, warming the streets of Ashford as the city woke to another day. Somewhere in a penthouse office, overlooking the city, Chloe Martinez was making calls, pulling strings, refusing to let the man who saved her daughter slip back into obscurity. And in a fourth-floor walk-up in Creston District, a 7-year-old girl sat reading her mother's journal, believing with absolute certainty that her father was a hero. Both women were right, and that terrified him more than anything. Chloe Martinez had built an empire by refusing to accept the word no. When investors said her AI algorithms were too ambitious, she'd proven them wrong and made billions. When competitors said Novatech couldn't dominate 3 different tech sectors simultaneously, she'd done exactly that. When people told her a woman under 35 couldn't command respect in boardrooms full of men twice her age, she'd smiled and taken their companies. So, when Bryce Chambers ignored her calls, deleted her messages, and disappeared like smoke, she didn't get discouraged. She got determined. Her office occupied the entire 48th floor of the Meridian Tower, all glass walls and minimalist furniture that cost more than most people's cars. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of Ashford that made the city look like a circuit board, all lights and geometric precision. But Chloe wasn't looking at the view. She was staring at her laptop screen, at the pathetically thin file her head of security had compiled on Bryce Chambers. Seth Newman sat across from her, a former police detective who now ran corporate investigations for Novatech. He was in his 50s, with salt and pepper hair and the weary eyes of someone who'd seen too much. "This is everything?" Chloe asked, her tone sharp. "That's everything," Seth confirmed. "The man's a ghost. He appeared in Ashford 3 years ago with a social security number, a driver's license, and nothing else. No credit history before that. No employment records. No digital footprint. Everyone has a digital footprint. Not this guy. He pays cash for rent. Doesn't have a bank account. No credit cards. No social media. It's like he's actively trying to stay invisible." Chloe leaned back in her chair, fingers steepled beneath her chin. What about his daughter? Lily, right? She's in school. Creston Elementary, 2nd grade, straight, a student, according to her teacher. Father listed as Bryce Chambers on the enrollment forms, mother listed as deceased, no name given. No name, that's not standard. Seth shrugged. The school didn't push. Single parent, kids clearly well cared for. All the paperwork was in order. They had no reason to dig deeper. Chloe stood, pacing to the window. Below, the city sprawled in all directions. Millions of people living their small lives while she orchestrated the future from her tower. "He saved my daughter's life," she said quietly, with skills that don't come from a Red Cross class. The way he moved, the way he assessed the situation, that was professional training. Advanced training. Could be former EMT, paramedic, maybe even a doctor who lost his license. Then why hide it? Why disappear? Chloe turned to face him. "Find out, Seth. I don't care what it costs. I want to know who Bryce Chambers really is." Seth hesitated. "Miss Martinez, with all due respect, maybe you should let this go. The man clearly wants his privacy. He saved your daughter, and that's a debt you can't repay if he won't let you. I don't leave debts unpaid." Her voice was steel. "And I don't let mysteries sit unsolved. There's a reason he's hiding. and I need to know what it is. After Seth left, Chloe returned to her desk. Beside her laptop sat a small card, hand-delivered that morning. An invitation to speak at the Ashford Medical Summit next month, a gathering of the city's top healthcare professionals. An idea began to form. She picked up her phone and dialed a number from memory. Dr. Naomi Cross. Came the crisp answer. Naomi, it's Chloe. I need a favor. Of course. How's Zoe? She's perfect. Completely recovered, thanks to a stranger who knew exactly what to do. Chloe paused. That's why I'm calling. I need you to help me find someone. 20 minutes later, Chloe had deployed her second strategy. Dr. Cross was the director of Ashford Memorial Hospital, one of the city's most prominent medical facilities. If Bryce Chambers had ever worked in medicine anywhere in the region, Naomi's network would find traces, but Chloe wasn't satisfied with waiting. She was used to controlling outcomes, not hoping for them. That evening, she did something she hadn't done in years. She went back to Luminaire. The restaurant was busy, the dinner rush in full swing. Chloe stood in the lobby, watching the flow of servers moving between tables. She'd called ahead, confirmed Bryce was working tonight. She'd also made sure her reservation was in his section. Alec Jennings greeted her personally, his demeanor hovering between obsequious and nervous. Miss Martinez, welcome back. Your table is ready. I've assigned our best server. That's exactly what I'm counting on. She was seated at a corner table, with a view of the kitchen doors. From here, she could watch the entire dining room. And within minutes, she saw him. Bryce emerged from the kitchen carrying a tray, his posture perfect, his expression neutral. He moved between tables with practiced efficiency, invisible to everyone around him. Except Chloe. She watched the way he scanned each table before approaching. The subtle assessment in his eyes. She noticed how he held the tray, balanced perfectly despite its weight. She saw the small scar on his left hand. Barely visible, but there. Those were surgeon's hands. She was certain of it. When Bryce finally approached her table, his expression didn't change, but she saw the flash of recognition in his eyes, quickly suppressed. Good evening. May I start you with something to drink? You know who I am, Chloe said flatly. Yes, ma'am. Then you know why I'm here. Bryce's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. I'm here to take your order, Miss Martinez. If you'd like to speak with management about the incident, I'm sure Mr. Jennings would be happy to. I don't want to speak with management. I want to speak with you. She gestured to the empty seat across from her. Sit. I'm working. I'll buy out your entire section for the night if I have to. Sit. For a long moment, they stared at each other. Then Bryce glanced around, saw that his other tables were occupied with customers who didn't need immediate attention, and lowered himself carefully into the chair. He didn't relax. He perched on the edge like a bird ready to take flight. 5 minutes, he said quietly. Chloe leaned forward. Who are you? I'm a waiter. You're not just a waiter. The way you handled that emergency. That was professional medical training. Advanced training. Where did you learn it? Pakes. Tex. And of Pakes. I'm a waiter. I took a first aid course. Don't insult my intelligence. Her voice was sharp. I've spent the last 3 days trying to find information about you. Do you know what I found? Nothing. You don't exist before 3 years ago. No history. No records. No trail. That's not accidental. You're hiding. Bryce's expression remained neutral, but his hands clenched briefly before he forced them to relax. I value my privacy. Why? That's none of your business. You saved my daughter's life. That makes it my business. No, Bryce said quietly. It doesn't. I did what anyone would have done. What anyone should have done. That doesn't give you the right to interrogate me. Chloe sat back, studying him. She recognized the look in his eyes. She'd seen it before in people who'd been burned, who'd learned that trust was a luxury they couldn't afford. She softened her tone, just slightly. "I'm not trying to invade your privacy, Mr. Chambers. I'm trying to understand. My daughter almost died in front of me, and a stranger with no reason to help saved her life. I need to know. Why? I need to know who you are." "I'm nobody," Bryce said. "I'm exactly what I appear to be. A single father working to support his daughter. That's all." "You have a daughter." He stood abruptly. "This conversation is over." "Wait, please, I didn't mean." But Bryce was already walking away, his shoulders rigid, disappearing into the kitchen. Chloe sat alone at the table, frustration building in her chest. She'd handled this wrong, pushed too hard, too fast. But she'd learned something valuable. He had a daughter, someone he was protecting. That's why he stayed invisible. The question was, protecting her from what? Chloe pulled out her phone and sent a text to Seth. "Expand the search. Focus on the daughter. School records, medical records, anything you can find legally. And be discreet." She paid for a meal she hadn't ordered and left the restaurant, her mind already working through the puzzle. Bryce Chambers was hiding, but everyone who hid was running from something. And Chloe had built her career on solving impossible problems. This was just another problem, another mystery to unravel. And she would unravel it, even if it meant pulling apart every thread until the truth lay bare. Because she'd meant what she said. She didn't leave debts unpaid. And the debt she owed Bryce Chambers was one she intended to repay, whether he wanted her to or not. Bryce made it through the rest of his shift on autopilot. He delivered meals he didn't remember plating, smiled at customers whose faces blurred together, collected tips he shoved into his pocket without counting. His mind was elsewhere, replaying the conversation with Chloe Martinez, calculating risks, measuring threats. She was investigating him. She'd said as much, and if she dug deep enough, asked the right questions, pulled the right strings, she'd eventually uncover the truth. The dishonorable discharge, the sealed records, the reason he'd vanished. And then what? Would the people who'd buried him come back to finish the job? Would they go after Lily to ensure his silence? The thoughts spiraled as he cleaned his section, cashed out his tips, and slipped out the back door into the alley behind Luminaire. The night air was cool, carrying the smell of rain that hadn't fallen yet. He was halfway down the alley when a figure stepped out from beside a dumpster. Bryce's body reacted before his mind caught up. He dropped into a defensive stance, weight balanced, hands raised. Then he recognized her. Lily stood in the shadows, her pink backpack slung over one shoulder, her face illuminated by the dim glow of a streetlight. "Lily, what the hell are you doing here?" His voice came out sharper than he intended, fear masquerading as anger. "I needed to talk to you," she said calmly, as if it were perfectly normal for a 7-year-old to be wandering downtown Ashford at 10 o'clock at night. "You're supposed to be at home, with Mrs. Patel." Mrs. Patel fell asleep watching her shows at 8:30. I left her a note. Bryce closed the distance between them in 3 strides, crouching down to her level. His hands gripped her shoulders, not hard, just firm enough to ground them both. "Lily, you can't do this. It's not safe. I took the bus. I stayed on the main streets. I didn't talk to anyone weird." She recited the rules he drilled into her, her voice matter of fact. "And I needed to see you because something's wrong, and you're not telling me what it is." He wanted to argue, to lecture her about responsibility and safety, and all the things 7-year-olds shouldn't have to worry about, but one look at her face, at those eyes that saw too much, stopped him. She knew. Somehow, she always knew. "Come on," he said quietly, standing and taking her hand. "Let's go home." They rode the bus in silence, Lily pressed against his side, her backpack between her feet. The other passengers barely glanced at them, another tired parent and sleepy offspring among dozens, making the late-night commute. Back at apartment 4C, Bryce locked the door behind them and turned to find Lily sitting on the couch, hands folded in her lap, Sarah's journal beside her. She looked so much like her mother in that moment that his heart twisted. "Talk," Lily said simply. "Lily." "Dad, I'm not stupid. Someone came to the restaurant tonight asking about you. I heard Mrs. Patel talking to her friend on the phone. She said a fancy lady in an expensive car came by asking questions about the waiter with the daughter." Lily's eyes narrowed. "That's the lady whose daughter you saved, isn't it?" Bryce sank into the chair across from her, suddenly exhausted. "Yes. And now she's looking for you." "Yes." "Why?" "Because she wants to thank me, to help me. She thinks she owes me something." "Don't you want help? We live in a tiny apartment, and you work 3 jobs, and I know you're tired all the time, even though you pretend you're not." The observation landed like a punch. He'd thought he'd hidden it better than that. "It's not that simple, sweetheart." "Then explain it to me. Use small words if you have to, but stop treating me like a baby." There was no anger in her voice, just a quiet insistence that demanded respect. Bryce leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and tried to find words that would make sense to a 7-year-old without terrifying her. "Before you were born, I was a doctor, a surgeon. I helped people, saved lives, did work I was proud of. I know that part. Mom told me stories. What Mom didn't tell you was that I lost everything because I wouldn't do something I thought was wrong. I spoke up when I should have stayed quiet, and the people I worked for made sure I couldn't work in medicine anymore. They took away my license. They erased my career, and they made it very clear that if I ever tried to fight back, things would get worse." Lily's face was serious, processing. "Worse how?" "For you, for the people I love." Understanding dawned in her eyes. "So you disappeared. You became invisible." "I became invisible," he confirmed. "I took jobs where nobody asked questions. I kept my head down. I kept you safe. But that lady, she's asking questions now." "Yes. And you're afraid. If she keeps asking, the bad people will find us." "Yes." Lily was quiet for a long moment, her small face troubled. Then she reached for Sarah's journal, flipping to a page she'd clearly marked. "Mom wrote something here," Lily said, her voice steady. She said, "Fear is a compass that points toward the things that matter most. But if you only follow fear, you end up going in circles." She looked up at him. "Dad, you've been going in circles for 3 years." The words struck him silent. "That girl you saved, she matters, right? Her life matters." "Of course. And the lady who's looking for you, she's not a bad person. She's a mom whose daughter almost died. She just wants to say thank you." "It's not that simple, Lily." "Why not?" The question was pure, unadorned. Why can't it be simple? Because life was complicated. Because trust was dangerous. Because the last time he'd believed in doing the right thing, it had cost him everything. But looking at Lily, at her fierce belief in a world that made sense, in a father who saved people instead of hiding from them, he felt something crack inside his chest. "What do you think I should do?" he asked quietly. Lily closed the journal carefully, her small hands reverent. "I think Mom would want you to stop being afraid. I think she'd want you to let someone help us for once." "And what do you want?" She met his eyes, and in that moment, she looked far older than 7. "I want my dad to stop feeling like he has to carry everything alone. I want you to remember that saving people is who you are, not just what you used to do." Her voice softened. "And I want to stop pretending we're okay when we're barely getting by." The confession hung in the air between them. Bryce had thought he'd been protecting her, shielding her from their financial struggles, from his fear. But Lily had known all along. She'd carried it with him, silently, because that's what children did. They carried their parents' burdens and pretended they didn't notice the weight. Bryce stood, crossed to the couch, and pulled Lily into his arms. She wrapped herself around him, small but strong, and he buried his face in her curls. "When did you get so wise?" he whispered. "I read a lot," she said against his shoulder. "Plus, I have a really good dad who taught me that helping people is always worth it, even when it's scary. They stayed like that for a long time, father and daughter, bound by love and loss, and the impossible courage of a child who believed her father was a hero. Finally, Bryce pulled back, brushing tears from his eyes. Okay, I'll talk to her, but if anything goes wrong, if I even suspect we're in danger, we disappear. Deal? Deal, Lily agreed. He pulled out his phone, stared at Chloe Martinez's number, and before he could change his mind, pressed call. She answered on the first ring. Mr. Chambers? Yes. You want to talk? Fine. Tomorrow. Noon. Ashford Central Park. East entrance. Come alone. I'll be there. And Miss Martinez, if this puts my daughter in danger, you'll never see me again. Understood? Understood. He hung up before she could say anything else. Lily smiled at him, proud and hopeful. See? That wasn't so hard. We'll see, Bryce muttered, but as he tucked Lily into bed an hour later, reading to her from a book about anatomy that was far too advanced but that she loved anyway, he felt something he hadn't felt in 3 years. Not quite hope, but maybe the distant possibility of it. And for now, with his daughter safe and the night quiet around them, that was enough. Ashford Central Park stretched across 15 acres of manicured green in the heart of downtown, an oasis of grass and old oaks surrounded by steel and glass. Bryce arrived early, watching from a bench near the east entrance as joggers passed and mothers pushed strollers along winding paths. Chloe Martinez appeared at exactly noon, dressed down in jeans and a simple blouse. No entourage, no security visible. She spotted him immediately and walked over, her expression cautious. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, sitting on the opposite end of the bench, respecting the distance between them. "You have 10 minutes, Bryce replied. "I want to help you. I don't know what you're running from, but I have resources. Lawyers. Connections. Whatever trouble you're in, I can." "You can't," Bryce interrupted. "And you asking questions only makes things worse." "Then help me understand. Who are you really?" Before Bryce could answer, his phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Patel, frantic and misspelled. Lily collapsed at school. Ambulance taking her to Ashford Memorial. Come now. The world tilted. Bryce was on his feet before he consciously decided to move, his heart hammering against his ribs. "What's wrong?" Chloe stood too, seeing the color drain from his face. "My daughter, hospital." The words came out strangled. "I'll drive you. My car is closer." There was no time to argue. They ran. Chloe's black sedan was parked illegally on the street, and she drove like someone who understood that seconds mattered. They reached Ashford Memorial in 8 minutes, a trip that should have taken 20. Bryce burst through the emergency room doors, Chloe right behind him. A nurse intercepted them. "Lily Chambers. Room 7. Are you family? I'm her father." The nurse's expression softened. "She's stable now, but it was close. Severe allergic reaction. Her teacher said she shared a snack with another student. Peanuts." Bryce's blood ran cold. Lily wasn't allergic to peanuts. She'd never been allergic to anything. He pushed past the nurse into room 7. Lily lay on the examination table, an oxygen mask over her face, her skin pale but her eyes open. When she saw him, tears spilled down her cheeks. "Dad," she whispered through the mask. He was at her side instantly, taking her small hand. "I'm here, sweetheart. I'm right here." A young doctor entered, looking harried. "Mr. Chambers, I'm Dr. Shaw. Your daughter experienced anaphylaxis. We administered epinephrine and she's responding well. But we need to run more tests to understand what triggered it." Bryce's trained eye scanned the monitors, the IV line, the medications listed on the chart. Something was wrong. The dosage of epinephrine was too high for a child Lily's size. "Stop," he said sharply. Dr. Shaw blinked. "Excuse me?" "The epinephrine dosage. It's calculated for an adult, not a child her weight." You're going to send her into cardiac arrest. Sir, I appreciate your concern, but I'm not concerned, I'm certain. Check your math. Her weight is 48 pounds. The standard dose is 0.3 milligrams. You've ordered 0.5. Dr. Shaw's face went white. He grabbed the chart, recalculating frantically. Oh my God, you're right. He rushed to the fore, adjusting the flow, his hands shaking. How did you know that? Bryce didn't answer. He was watching Lily's monitor, watching her heart rate stabilize, watching his daughter come back from the edge. Behind him, Chloe stood in the doorway, her eyes wide. She'd heard everything. She'd seen the way Bryce moved, the authority in his voice, the knowledge that came not from Google but from years of training. You're a doctor, she breathed. Bryce ignored her, focused entirely on Lily. You're okay, sweetheart. You're going to be okay. Lily's small voice came through the mask. I told you helping people is who you are. And in that moment, with his daughter alive and the truth exposed, Bryce realized she'd been right all along. The hospital hallway buzzed with activity, but inside room 7, time seemed suspended. Lily slept peacefully now, her breathing steady, color returning to her cheeks. Bryce sat in a chair pulled close to her bed, his hand wrapped around hers. Chloe stood by the window, giving them space but not leaving. She'd stayed through all of it, watching Bryce work with the medical staff, seeing the respect that crept into their eyes when they realized he knew more than he should. You saved her life twice, Chloe said quietly. First, my daughter, now yours. Any father would have done the same. Any father wouldn't have known about epinephrine dosages by weight. She turned to face him. You were a surgeon, weren't you? Military, based on how you move. Bryce's jaw tightened. Does it matter? It matters to me. It matters because I've been trying to figure out who you are. And now I think I understand. You weren't running from something. You were protecting someone. Before Bryce could respond, the door opened. An older man in a security uniform stepped inside. His weathered face breaking into a smile when he saw Bryce. Captain Chambers? Sir, is that really you? Bryce's head snapped up, shock flashing across his features. Henderson, the security guard, Anthony White by his name tag, crossed the room with surprising speed for a man in his 60s. I heard the nurses talking about a man who caught a dosage error, knew the exact calculations. I thought, no way, but I had to check. Sir, I served under you in Afghanistan, 3rd Battalion Medical Unit. Bryce stood slowly, memories flooding back. Sergeant Henderson, what are you doing here? Working security, sir. Been here 5 years since I retired. Anthony's eyes were bright with emotion. You saved my life once, you know. Took shrapnel in the shoulder. You operated under fire. Told me I'd make it home to see my grandkids. You were right. I was just doing my job. You were doing more than that. Sir, we all knew what you did. How you stood up when they tried to make us do things that weren't right. You lost everything because you had a conscience. Anthony's voice carried through the hallway, and nurses passing by slowed, listening. And here you are, still saving lives, even after they tried to erase you. Chloe's expression shifted as understanding dawned. They court-martialed you for refusing orders, for refusing to experiment on refugees. Bryce said quietly, for refusing to turn medicine into a weapon. The hallway had gone silent. Doctors, nurses, patients, all listening now. Anthony stood straighter, and despite his age, despite the years, he snapped to attention and saluted. Captain Bryce Chambers, it's been an honor, sir. Then and now. Slowly, with tears in his eyes, Bryce returned the salute. The gesture rippled through the hallway. A young nurse began clapping. Then another. Within seconds, the applause spread, filling the corridor with sound. Lily stirred, her eyes fluttering open. Dad, what's happening? Bryce sat back down, taking her hand. Nothing, sweetheart. Just people being kind. But Lily saw Anthony's salute, saw the respect in the faces around them, and she smiled. They see you now. They finally see you. 3 days later, Chloe sat in her office, but her mind was elsewhere. On her desk lay a folder Seth had delivered that morning, the culmination of his investigation into Bryce Chambers. The truth was worse than she'd imagined. Captain Bryce Chambers had been one of the military's most decorated field surgeons. He'd saved hundreds of lives, earned commendations, been recommended for honors that were never awarded. Then he discovered Operation Clearwater, a classified program using refugees as test subjects for experimental medications. He'd reported it. He'd refused to participate, and for that, they destroyed him. Dishonorable discharge. Medical license revoked. His wife's cancer treatment denied by military insurance. She died 3 months after his discharge. Chloe's hands trembled as she read the final page. The program had been funded through a grant from Nova Tech Industries, routed through a subsidiary she'd personally approved 5 years ago. She'd funded the program that had destroyed Bryce Chambers. The realization hit her like a physical blow. She stood abruptly, pacing to the window, bile rising in her throat. She'd been so focused on growth, on expansion, on proving herself in a male-dominated industry, that she hadn't questioned where the money went or what it funded. She'd signed the authorization without reading the details, trusting her board, trusting the system. And in doing so, she'd become complicit in the very thing Bryce had sacrificed everything to stop. Her phone buzzed. A text from her assistant. Board meeting in 10 minutes. Budget approvals for Q4. Chloe stared at the message, then at the folder on her desk. She thought about Zoe, about how close she'd come to losing her daughter, about how a man who'd lost everything had still chosen to help. She made her decision. The boardroom fell silent when she entered. 12 executives, all waiting for her to rubber stamp another quarter of profits and expansion. There's been a change, Chloe announced. I'm pulling our funding from all military research programs, effective immediately. The room erupted in protests. That's $12 million in annual revenue. Her CFO sputtered. I don't care. Chloe, be reasonable. These are legal contracts. Legal doesn't mean ethical. Her voice cut through the noise. 5 years ago, I approved funding for a program that used refugees as test subjects. I didn't know the details because I didn't ask. That ends now. She placed the folder on the table. This is the story of a man who lost everything because he refused to be complicit. I won't make his sacrifice meaningless by continuing to fund the system that destroyed him. This will cost us. Someone warned. Good, Chloe said. Some costs are worth paying. The Ashford Medical Summit filled the grand ballroom with doctors, researchers, and healthcare professionals from across the region. Chloe Martinez stood at the podium, her prepared speech abandoned. I'd like to introduce someone, she said instead. A man who reminded me what medicine is supposed to be. Bryce Chambers walked onto the stage, uncomfortable in borrowed dress clothes, Lily holding his hand. The audience applauded politely, confused. This is Captain Bryce Chambers, Chloe continued. He saved my daughter's life, and before that, he saved hundreds of others. He lost his career for refusing to compromise his ethics. He lost everything for standing up when staying silent would have been easier. She turned to Bryce. I can't give you back what was taken, but I can make sure your story is told. Bryce stepped to the microphone, his voice steady. I'm not here for recognition. I'm here because my daughter insisted that good people shouldn't stay hidden. Lily stepped forward, surprising everyone. Her small voice carried through the microphone. My mom wrote that if you save someone by doing what's right, you've already lived forever. My dad proved that. He saved people even when the world forgot him. That's what heroes do. The applause this time was thunderous. Later, as they walked through the park where everything had changed, Lily looked up at her father. Are you still scared? A little, Bryce admitted. But your mom was right. Fear kept pointing me in circles. It's time to walk a straight line. Chloe had established a fund in his name, covering Lily's education and offering support to other whistleblowers who'd lost everything for speaking truth. It wouldn't erase the past, but it was a start. "Do you think people will remember you now?" Lily asked. Bryce looked down at his daughter, at her fierce belief in a world that made sense, and smiled. "I don't need the world to remember me, sweetheart. I just need you to." "I'll always remember," Lily promised. "And I'll make sure everyone knows that good people aren't forgotten. They're just waiting for someone brave enough to call their name." As the sun set over Ashford, a former surgeon, a tech CEO, and a 7-year-old girl who believed in heroes walked together, proving that sometimes the quietest voices carry the loudest truths. And in that moment, invisible became unforgettable. 2 years later, the morning sun filtered through the windows of a modest but comfortable townhouse in the Maple Ridge district of Ashford. The neighborhood was quiet, tree-lined, the kind of place where children rode bikes on sidewalks and neighbors knew each other's names. Bryce stood in the kitchen, preparing breakfast, while Lily sat at the table, now 9 years old and somehow even more brilliant than before. She was reading a medical journal, legitimate subscription paid for by the scholarship fund Chloe had established, making notes in the margins with the same intensity her mother once had. "Dad, did you know that the average human body contains enough iron to make a 3-inch nail?" Lily announced without looking up. "I did know that, actually," Bryce replied, flipping pancakes. "But it's still cool every time you learn it." His phone buzzed. A text from Chloe. "Morning rounds at the clinic start at 9. Zoe wants to know if Lily can come over this weekend. Something about a science project involving volcanoes." Bryce smiled. The friendship between Lily and Zoe had grown into something beautiful. Two brilliant young minds pushing each other toward impossible dreams. The clinic Chloe mentioned was the Chambers Medical Initiative, a free healthcare facility in the Creston district serving families who couldn't afford traditional care. Chloe had funded it, but Bryce ran it, his medical license quietly restored through legal channels once the full story of Operation Clearwater had been exposed. It had been a long fight. Congressional hearings, sealed documents, unsealed, other whistleblowers coming forward, emboldened by Bryce's story. The dishonorable discharge had been overturned, replaced with an honorable one and a formal apology from the Department of Defense. Not that the apology meant much, but the restoration of his ability to practice medicine, that meant everything. "Are we still going to see Mr. Henderson today?" Lily asked, closing her journal. "After my shift. He wants to show you his vegetable garden. Says his tomatoes are finally ripe." Anthony White, the security guard who'd recognized Bryce at the hospital, had become like family. He visited weekly, sharing stories of their time in service, treating Lily like the granddaughter he'd always wanted. The doorbell rang. Bryce opened it to find a courier holding a large envelope marked with an official seal. Inside was an invitation. The Ashford Medical Association's annual gala, requesting the honor of Dr. Bryce Chambers' presence as the recipient of the Humanitarian Award for ULSE, Outstanding Service to Underserved Communities. Lily peeked over his shoulder. "Are you going to go?" "I don't know. These things aren't really my style, Dad," Lily said with the exasperated tone of someone far older than 9. "You spent 3 years being invisible. Maybe it's okay to be seen now." He looked at his daughter, at her mother's eyes staring back at him, and realized she was right. Again, that evening, after his shift at the clinic where he treated a dozen patients who thanked him not with money but with genuine gratitude, Bryce returned home to find Lily on the couch reading Sarah's journal as she often did. "I found a new page today," Lily said softly, "one I hadn't read before." She read aloud, her voice carrying Sarah's words into the present. "The measure of a life isn't in the accolades you receive or the titles you hold. It's in the moments when you choose compassion over comfort, truth over safety, and love over fear. If you can do that, even once, you've lived a life worth remembering." Bryce sat beside her, pulling her close. "Your mom was a wise woman." She was. And she chose you because she knew you'd always choose right, even when it cost you everything. Outside, the city of Ashford hummed with its endless motion. Somewhere in a penthouse office, Chloe Martinez reviewed proposals for the next medical initiative, her empire now built as much on ethics as innovation. Somewhere in a hospital, Anthony White walked his rounds, telling anyone who'd listen about the doctor who'd saved his life twice. And somewhere, in the quiet neighborhoods and busy streets, people whose lives had been touched by one invisible man carried his impact forward. Bryce Chambers had learned that being forgotten and being invisible were different things. One was imposed by others. The other was a choice. He'd chosen to be invisible to protect his daughter, to survive, to endure. But Lily had taught him that some lights are meant to shine, not to illuminate yourself, but to help others find their way in the dark. "I love you, sweetheart," Bryce whispered. "I love you too, Dad. And I'm proud of you." Every single day. In that small townhouse, with his daughter safe beside him and his purpose restored, Bryce Chambers finally understood what Sarah had known all along. Heroes aren't remembered for being perfect. They're remembered for being present. And he was finally, truly, present. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.